Latest brain research, neurotheology. Dr. Andrew Newberg set up a brain imaging system that could for the very first time track exactly what happens inside a meditator's brain as he meditates. Dr. Newberg explains, when the subject comes into our lab, what we normally do is bring them into a fairly quiet room. They would then begin the meditation. We are not even in the room. To minimize distractions, the only contact we had with them was a string they tugged when they approached a meditational peak. The pulling of the string was the cue for the MED team to inject a radioactive tracer into the meditator's body. This tracer was carried in the blood up to the brain, producing an accurate freeze-frame picture of the blood flow in the meditator's brain. At the high point of his metaphysical climax, the scan measured blood flow, with red showing highest areas of blood flow, and yellow the lowest. The results revealed, as in other experiments, that the temporal lobes were certainly involved, but they showed something else. As the meditation reached its peak, a brain area called the parietal lobes had less and less blood flowing into them. They seemed almost to be shutting down. This was significant new information. The parietal lobes help give us our sense of time and place. 888 Dr. Newberg explains, this part of our brain typically takes all our sensory information to create a sense of ourselves. When people meditate, they frequently describe a loss of that sense of self. That's exactly what we did see in the meditation subjects. They actually decrease activity of this parietal, this orientation part of the brain. This strange sensation of loss of self is central to religious feelings. In all the world's faiths, Buddhists seek a feeling of oneness with the universe. Hindus strive for their souls and God to become one, and the Catholics search for the unum mysticus. Dr. Newberg wondered if these very different religions were all describing the same thing. To test his theory, he took scans of Franciscan nuns at prayer to see if there were any similarity between what was going on in their brains and Buddhist meditators. Dr. Newberg explains, interestingly, when we look at Franciscan nuns we find a similar decrease in orientation part of the brain, as we saw with the Tibetan Buddhists. Even though Buddhists and Catholics may come from very different religious traditions, how their minds react to deep meditational prayer seem in terms of brain chemistry to be exactly the same process. Dr. Newberg's research shows the first clear scientific evidence that there are a number of different brain areas involved in religious belief. Dr. Newberg explains, our study results show there is a large network of brain areas, brain structures, involved in these spiritual experiences. I think our study shows that there are lots of different parts of our brain that get turned on and get turned off, suggesting there is an overall network of structures that seems to be involved in these types of practices. The implications of Dr. Newberg's research, along with that of Dr. Persinger, are simply huge. They do suggest that how or what we believe is deeply controlled by the basic physical makeup of our minds. It begs the question, why have we developed this ability? Perhaps there is a simple evolutionary explanation. Studies have shown that believers live longer, are healthier, even that they may have lower levels of cancer and heart disease. Could it somehow have evolved, this religious belief, as a survival mechanism? In reply, only a rhetorical question from Dawkins to this proposition. He said, if you ask the question what's the survival value of religious belief, it could be you are asking the wrong question. What you should be doing is asking, what's the survival value of this kind of brain, which manifests itself as religious belief under the right circumstances? Which is simply paraphrasing the question to avoid answering, haha, oh dear skeptics. But if religious faith is somehow byproduct of evolution, does that mean that belief in God can be dismissed as a quirk of nature? The fact is, it's much too early to use the new field of neurotheology as a way of explaining away people's faith. Although there is evidence to suggest our brains are hardwired for religion, this doesn't mean that God can be dismissed as just a trick of brain chemistry. A scientist explains here, just because there are circuits in your brain that predispose you to religious beliefs, that doesn't negate in any way the values of religious belief, and it may be God's way of putting an antenna in your brain to make you more receptive to God. Nothing us scientists are saying about the brain, or about neurocircuitry for religion, in any way negates the existence of God, nor negates the value of personal religious experience. A theologian here advises, it would be very surprising if we didn't discover more about the physics and chemistry of those parts of our bodies which process the various bits of enjoyment we receive from religious beliefs. I think Christians, and other religious believers, have absolutely nothing to fear from further investigation, and indeed should be keen on it and canny when it comes to the interpretation of it. What is beyond doubt is that the origins of religion are even more complex than had been thought. The science of neurotheology has revealed it's too simplistic to see religion as either spiritually inspired or just social conditioning. What it shows is our brains have developed specific structures that help us believe in God. Remarkably, it seems, whether God exists or not, the way our brains have developed, we will go on believing. Dawkins, of God delusion, but then, with some skeptic bitterness, the human religious impulse seems very difficult to wipe out, which to me causes a certain amount of grief. Clearly, religion has an extreme tenacity. Reminder here, in Dr. Persinger's brain activity test, out of 1,000 people, Richard Dawkins had the lowest temporal lobe activity, suggesting that may be the online skeptics' problem. Simple temporal lobe underactivity, resulting in their similar grief, displayed online, toward religions and ESP. Moving along, scientist Dr. Newberg explains, because the brain seems to be designed the way it is, and because religion and spirituality seem to be built so well into that brain function, the concepts of God and religion are going to be around for a very, very long time. Footnote: the uploader here is not religious, not a creationist, but I do confess to doing 25 years of meditation. So just how bad is that? And that deep meditation can be done instantly with a little machine with headphones and light glasses. It's called a Proteus. That meditation is more restful than the deepest sleep, and simply that could be why meditators live longer and have less illnesses. Does that make sense? And for the skeptics, PhD doctors Persinger and Newberg were supervised by a bearded magician on loan from a traveling circus to ensure scientific rigor was adhered to at all times. Thank God for that.